All right. It's now time for raising funds for world domination. Day number 208. Orthoplex 64, how's it going? So today's update. Yeah, no new information on the appeal. No updates on the Merchant Center situation. And I will probably schedule the next video for members only to public. And other than that, today I did work on. I went out and did some filming today, and I worked on scripting for one of the next videos. Oh yeah, and on the storefront, I actually made a sale last night. Oh, actually 16. I reduced the price. I'll probably just keep him at 16 for a while. So I sold Cinderite ore. And actually, yeah, I added that to the game and I pushed it today. Yeah, and also merged in the changes that I did the last couple nights. So the theme of the last few days, I've been doing some refactoring on how events get propagated around with all the user interface frames, and there's a bunch of complexity in there that needs to be ironed out. There we go. There's Cinderite. Or no, I pronounced it wrong. Siderite. I'm actually learning a lot about iron, the different iron ores that exist. Siderite. So that's in the game now. And it's in the help menu as well. Dedicated to Cold Wolf Actual. So there's only one more sponsored block type in the store. I'll have to add some more. Let me think. Yeah, I think I actually have a bunch of different like one-off custom messages that I'm passing data around between the threads, and so I'm gonna try to consolidate those into a more generic way of doing things. So the next will be, I think, when the position of the player changes. Actually, I think I have some like yeah, I think there's like some circular stuff going on here. Yeah, so this shouldn't really be in the frame. Eventually, this should actually be on the server. Don't remember seeing logger statements in your code before. Which logging library are you using? I'm using. Actually, that's a kind of complicated. SL for J. Actually, honestly, there's the logging library has been a major source of confusion for me, because there's log for J, SL for J, there's logging commons, there's like log back, and some of them are APIs, some of them are implementations, and there's like the SL for J API and implementation, and I've actually just kind of gone with whatever I can get working. And actually, I was trying to recently upgrade to Spring Boot, to the latest version of Spring Boot, and that's like a nightmare, because there's if I try to just upgrade to the latest version, there's so many things that don't work in that version with something else. Like it basically forces a massive upgrade of everything. Yeah, it's like I've spent so much time trying to get it working, and the fact that I think in Spring or Spring Boot or something, I think it's commons logging is included, so you have to like add an exclusion to exclude commons logging, so it actually includes the right version. And I think that's also one of the things that changed in like the new version of Spring Boot, so that was causing problems. And then I finally got it to compile, and then like it would have like runtime errors and stuff, and it's just, yeah. So I basically use whatever of those actually works, and I just do like get my logger object and do log.info. You know what I think I'll do? I will change that to a vector. That's actually one of the things I want to do eventually. Is the whole point of this like block paste coordinate system thing is I want to also maybe I want to build it in such a way that I can seamlessly add navigating around in other dimensions, so you can like I could maybe even add like even just for experimentation, I could add like the extra dimension like W, and that could be like changing through seed values or something, so you can like go to a place in the world and then change the world at that position, or like navigate some other like data structures that are stored there. How hard would it be to make the whole world higher dimension? Made some dimension agnostic code, if I recall correctly. It basically already is. That's kind of been a pretty fundamental premise of my, like if some of my code looks kind of crazy, that's why, is because I've kept that support all the way through as much as I can. In fact, when I refactored that like cuboid address thing, I actually had to do a bunch of stuff for like the actual player position is actually 4 dimensions from like already. Let me think. If I go to okay, that one's 3, but if I go to okay, on render coordinate. Okay, I guess the player position, right now I just have player position as 3 dimensions, but when I calculate like the map area, I'm doing it in 4 dimensions. And that's because I think it was so it was because yeah, with the in-memory chunks thing that I define, I'm initializing it as a four-dimensional system because I actually already have some data stored there. So at the moment, inside of the world, the player position, like when you restart the game, player position and the inventory are stored at these just arbitrary hard-coded locations. And that's off in the 4th dimension. And I plan to store most of the game, like game world information, like all the data will be saved there. So that'll mean you can I may add like a debug feature where you can you just change into, you can use like a go to teleport to a specific block location, and then you can literally just browse the internal save files basically. Such charming and photogenic Shopify page, by the way. Excellent. I'm glad they like it. Yeah, I don't know. The banner is not really. It's not super photogenic. I just made it. I wanted the Shopify page to be simple. So the banner I have, that's the one I use for my other social medias. I really need to update it. But I just wanted to make you recognizable. So if someone went there and they're like, "Is this like a fraud, an imposter thing or something?" Yeah, hopefully the reviewers like it, and then I can get it reactivated. Yeah, so the chunk loading, the memory areas loading, that already exists with that, and also the map area. that is already in 4 dimensions. And I guess it's just the player address is not. But I guess maybe I could update that now. Oh yeah, and then like that 999 address. So that's like literally basically just a block, and the block type is it's a JSON object that just stores the player's position. And then of course the inventory at this location. Eventually, what I think I'm probably going to do is once there's like multiple players, like one of the stepwise ways I'm going to introduce like multiplayer ability is you will have when you start up the game, you can have a concept of a world connection, and within the context of a world connection, you have like a UUID for your user, and that UUID will map to another, maybe even a block in the world, like an address, and then that block will contain a bunch of information. It could even just be like a JSON object of addresses to other blocks, one of which would be like this. So it'd be like, you can almost think of it like a DNS or something, where you connect to it, and then you're just given like a list of pointers. Say like, okay, this is where your inventory is. This is where your inventory is. This is where the player position is located. This is where your equipment is, and all kinds of stuff. So any information associated with the player, or even necessary information. Right now, this is really the only like kind of internal game data that exists. Everything else is just the OR. Dimensions don't match. Okay, that works. How long have you been coding for? Today, approximately 30 minutes. Or if you mean in life or on this project. I think I started programming when I was around 14. Okay, that might do what I want. Okay, those are all correct. My channel of amazing stuff says, did you eat frozen pizza, butter chicken, or raisin or gummy candy today? I did for supper. I did have the other half of the frozen pizza, and I did have some more of those gummy candies as well today. And then I also had a taco bowl. There's a place I go regularly to. They have like pre-made, or they have like they make fresh food every weekday. Now let's see, is that flag even used? Nope, I don't think it is. So let's get rid of it. Taco ball sounds delicious. It is. Is that with shredded beef or ground beef? I think it's ground beef. And there's also some chicken. You can choose. Okay, the next thing is going to be to move that function on try position change. Back into the client block model context. When you were in Silicon Valley, you had NorCal Mexican food. Is Canadian Mexican the same or different? I don't even think maybe I had like Mexican once or twice or something. The thing is, I didn't really get to do a lot down there. I was when I worked at NVIDIA, I had to ride my bicycle everywhere. Actually, I was kind of shocked at how hostile that environment is to people who don't have cars. Like I had a lot of trouble finding even grocery stores. Like I had to bike for like an hour to get to a grocery store anywhere to even like get anything decent. And finding decent like takeout places was was hard. Usually I ate supper. But yeah, I ate lunch and supper at the NVIDIA cafeteria every day. They had a program where if you stayed late, you would get like $5 off your meal or something. So I also stayed for that. It was a good tactic to get people to work late. Yeah, I think I went to there was a place that had I stayed at 3 different places down there because it was so hard to find housing. I was in like Airbnbs all the time. There was a place I went a few times that had what was it, like deli sandwiches that were really good. Like artisan deli sandwiches. And I'd stock up on those. Is there a Linux command similar to traceroute that adds locations of the routes the packets are going through? Like a geographic locations? I see what you mean. I'm not sure. Delivery landscape has changed. Both prepared RTE and groceries can be delivered. Walmart will deliver groceries as well as Safeway. Yeah, I guess I never thought of a delivery at the time. It also gives coordinates. Do you mean like latitude and longitude? I think that's that's a different type of thing. Like in general, that is not generally possible. With traceroute, you're giving like timings, but what you can do, like you can take the IP address, and there's database. You can geolocate an IP, which is like a separate step. And depending on what database, like doing that poorly and doing that well requires databases. So there's specific IPs where you can map the IP to a geographic location because it's like registered to like, some specific office somewhere. But so I think like the public versions of that information are often inaccurate and or out of date, but you can actually buy access to, I think, proprietary databases that have like maintained and updated IP addresses. Like companies use that for like fraud prevention and stuff to know where you are. But I think what you're looking for is more of like a custom solution rather than. I doubt there's one specific. You can probably just Google. I haven't looked into this in a long time, but you can probably just Google like geolocation IP databases. And the last time I looked into it, like you had to pay money to get access to like a SQL database, and you get like the dumps or something, and then you have to like install and like set up the database. There's probably APIs you can use. But I would imagine they're like you have to pay for them or something. But there is like free. Like if you just type in like geolocate IP address, I guarantee you there's like a million like free ones that are out there. But like I said, they may be wrong because often some of those IPs will change, and also they you might just get like the nearest. Like if you're looking up like a residential IP, or even I guess like a data center or something, you might just get the nearest public node as opposed to the actual thing you're talking to. Usually routers have airport style city names to give away a location. Yeah, that's true. A lot of data centers use that. That'll give you some hints. Okay, I think that's good enough. Do you use any concurrency concepts in your project? Yes. Actually, there's you may even argue it's an overkill approach to concurrency. So every single frame in the game runs in a separate thread, and actually stuff like chunk initialization and a whole bunch of other stuff is all in a separate thread. So that way that thread can be locked at 100%, and then there's another thread that's constantly receiving and responding to the inputs. Mac 0921 says, my vision is augmented. Excellent. It's important to be able to see well. Okay, that should work. Although I think I still have that circular thing going on. It's a possibility this could like deadlock, but we'll see. Nope, it's broken. How do you manage all the threads to prevent race conditions? A lot of mutexes, I assume. Actually, no. I try to avoid the concurrency aspect as much as possible. Or like in my approach, I've tried to avoid the use of those like concurrency mechanisms as much as I can. So the way, basically, to run the game, I'm doing a whole bunch of work and passing messages around. So each thread starts off with a all the threads extend from a work item processor task. So that's work item processor task. And the code for work item processor task is, so it runs, and this is kind of crazy. I can probably simplify this. But this is my super generic. So everything runs through this. So all the work that's done is packaged up into like a work item. And for each thread, I can have different types of work items, so I make sure I don't add a work item to the wrong thread. It's like a type safety measure, so it takes work items. So it reads from a work item queue, and while okay, it takes a work item, so it takes a work item and then does the work. Takes a work item, does the work, but in between, every time it checks. Oh yeah, this is a blocking read. So if there's no work items, it blocks on this. So if there's nothing for it to do, it just blocks there. But if there is something to do, it'll do that, and then it gets back to here. If there's and I also have a thing for background processing tasks, so this basically allows it to it can respond. So if like in the chunk initializer, I wanted to read a new work item that maybe changes like how the work should be done, I wanted to read that event immediately. But then as a background thing, if there's no work items, then it does the background processing tasks. If there's no work items or background processing tasks, then it's allowed to go through here, and then it just blocks on this. And it's a priority blocking queue. So that way I can also change the priority of work items. I haven't necessarily had to use that a lot yet, but that exists. And then I have some exception catching stuff, lots of exception catching stuff. So the way it works is if any thread encounters an exception, what it does is it detects that and then tells all the threads to shut down gracefully. And then it prints out the exception or exceptions. So that's why you've probably seen it when it crashes. It just immediately prints out the exception. That was actually difficult to get that. Yeah, so that's the work item processor task. So and then I guess it extends work item queue owner. So the work item queue owner. It's just a base class that owns a work item queue, which is the thing I just showed. And the other aspect is so for the threads to synchronize and coordinate, actually, to be honest, I should actually rename work item to message, because I didn't have this initially, but at first I just had like asynchronous work items, and then it made a lot more sense to have an option, so I can have asynchronous work items and then synchronous ones. So I can send a work item and then expect a response. And so the thread that's sending that to another thread, so what it does, it puts a message in the other thread's message queue. Is the work item a concurrent data structure? Yes. So that's basically where I kind of centralize all the, like any of the mutex, concurrency, race condition stuff. That way, basically so you can think of like a bunch of different threads beside each other. And if the only way they talk to each other is by putting a message in the other thread's message queue, and if that data structure, that priority blocking synchronized priority blocking queue, as long as that's thread safe, and as long as the thread executes the work item within its own thread context, and as long as you're not sending in a data structure that points to memory from another thread, which is another potential complication, then that basically allows you to completely forget about all of the like mutex type stuff. There is an exception, and that is this in-memory chunks class. So I do have other threads that read from this, and for this I do have a bit of like synchronized stuff all over these methods, because there are yeah, I think the in-memory threads is also it's its own thread, or it's a work item queue owner, and then also the client and other classes read from this as well, so they can actually read what blocks are in the world. One step closer to WDD. Go ahead and execute order 66. Full send. Let's roll. Order 66. That's from Star Wars, isn't it? Yeah, so that's the overview on the concurrency thing. So just package everything into threads. And then make sure that the thread has an associated thread state. And as long as it's just running stuff. Now, actually, part of the larger refactoring effort that I have is there's a kind of a design flaw where there's stuff that has to be set up. So when I create a thread state, it needs to set stuff up in the constructor. But the constructor for the thread state is constructed in a different thread's context. So there's some stuff like when I want to get a piece of it, like some of the threads to start up might need information from another thread, and that's problematic right now because when I construct the thread, it'll try sending messages to that other thread, but it's sending them in the context of a different thread. It's calling its constructor. So then I get like deadlocks and stuff. So I'm changing the design to hopefully make it so that the constructor will be simpler, and then upon constructing the thread, there'll be a message added that just like says like init yourself, and then that one message that'll be the first message that every thread executes, which calls this init method. And because it will be executed within that thread's context, then I don't have that problem with the kind of bootstrapping of stuff. But I have there's kind of a rat's nest of issues to resolve till I get there. Okay, so I broke movement. this here, I think is problematic and not needed anymore. Hopefully that was why it wasn't working. Really cool. Have you used this mechanism previously, or is this the first implementation? Taking a course on concurrent data structures. So this is pretty neat. Yeah, I'd say this approach kind of comes from. So yeah, like if you take a concurrency course, like if you're taking a course with like semaphores and coroutines and all that stuff, debugging concurrency problems is very difficult. And I would say, in general, like fixing concurrency problems is not something you should do. Like screwing around with semaphores and stuff, that's not something you should do as a regular software engineering activity. Like I think if you're actually spending a lot of time like actually writing and debugging the semaphore, and most likely you probably shouldn't be doing that. It depends what you're doing. I would say like if you like for one thing, for those like concurrent data structures, if you're using Java, try to just find an existing data structure that already has that in it, so you don't have to write this stuff yourself. The alternative would be if you need something very specialized, like if you're writing a buffer for like a custom buffer for networking or something, and it has to be like the absolute max performance, and then you look to see what's available in the language, and there's nothing there, like if no one's already written it before, or like you're writing an operating system or something. Yeah, if you're like writing custom device driver software, then you may have no choice. There's no alternative because you're the first one writing it. But I think in any kind of higher level application, you should try to just use some existing structures, or like put all your concurrency stuff into like a bottleneck. You asked about have I used this mechanism previously? To be honest, I would say this design is heavily influenced from my experience doing like operating system development and writing like microkernels, because in a way this is almost exactly the same thing as like a microkernel architecture. So like it's almost like writing, the game it's like an operating system, so it tries to minimize response time by having anything that does I/O should be blocked as much as possible in a block state, waiting for input, or waiting for output to output. And then all the other like work stuff, like the chunk initialization and math and stuff, that can be off in a separate thread. And then when the application needs to, move data around, that gets sent through messages. Now, of course, there's a trade-off, which is if you go with a microkernel architecture, you can have the minimum possible response time with a microkernel architecture, but you are also wasting CPU time by copying and moving around information, because every time you like if you have a simple thing, like I guess one example is the way I'm making it now is I have a one thread for like the kind of the model context, like I'm going to make it the authoritative source of like the inventory and the actual state of your player at any given time. And then the frame is like a user interface element. So for example, when I change the currently selected crafting recipe, that'll send a message to the model context and let it know that that's changed. But really that's kind of overkill, because you could just like change a number. You could just say like currently selected index +1 instead of crafting a message sending it off. But what this will allow is like, I went with this like framing concept. So this would also make it easier to support like other weird cases. Like if I open, after I finish doing this stuff, this refactoring, it should work if I open the same frame multiple times. So I think right now, if I open 2 different map areas and I move the cursor around, it won't update the like current position for both. But after I make these updates, then I think it should be able to do that. Yeah, there's everything's a trade-off. Okay, I deleted that message that was being passed because I don't think it's needed. And it might have even been actually, it might even caused a live lock. A live lock is the opposite of a deadlock. When you have, well, in this example, that would be where it's just like circularly sending threads around to each other. So that's totally broken. Max0921 coming in with the Deus Ex. Oh, is that a my vision is augmented? Is that a reference to something? Deus Ex, that was a video game, if I'm not mistaken. Not big into pokes? Yeah, me neither. Through the shop, people can sort of buy or sponsor or to be added to the game. Is that right? Yes. Currently I have, there's only one more ore type for purchase. It's another iron. I sold siderite last night. And I need to return to, I need to add some more types the store. I'm thinking actually I gotta add more recipes, so I think I'll probably add one. I'll focus it a lot around just like processing the ore types. So I think maybe I have to think about what I'm going to do to represent charcoal, because like I can put in carbon. I want to focus it on cast numbers first, just to keep it from adding too many arbitrary things. But yeah, I'll have to figure. I'm going to think about some new crafting recipes that focus just around like processing the iron ore types, and then I'll kind of go from there. And then you can start like manufacturing more interesting stuff. And I was thinking of actually, I was thinking about actually adding to go along with it, to add a water block. And I may dramatically change the ore generation, because right now when I add new ore types, the terrain generation is just it's kind of lazy. But I may add like a variable for like the water content. I may what I can do with the noise function, I can do I could just have like a noise map of areas with heat, areas with water content, and depending on like the heat or water content, or maybe pressure too at that location, then that'll determine what actually renders there. So that there's a whole bunch of like the low grade ores that are just like hydrates and stuff, and then maybe some of I think the higher grade ores probably are produced at higher temperatures. But I'll have to like learn some geology. And that'll get kind of more interesting features in the game. So you'll see is like there'll be areas where there'll be like a massive vein of like a low grade hydrate ore that's surrounded by a body of water. You distinguish source water and flowing water like Minecraft, or will water blocks flow or be conserved? For now, to begin with, like in terms of those more complicated mechanics, I probably won't add those at all. It'll probably just be like a block that represents water, and it's like it'll probably be like, inaccurate and not exciting. So just like you mine it just like any other block, and then I don't know, it shows up in your inventory. That'll probably be just the first step, and then over time I can like think about well, I guess in Minecraft water shows up in your inventory, or you have to get a bucket for it. I guess I could do that. Yeah, maybe that could be one of the things you make iron ore, and then iron ore is used to make buckets or bowls or something like that. There's an infinite number of possibilities. Let's delete that. That's why it does not send a notify. Okay, that may have untangled some of the nonsense with the player position changing. Alright, it's back to working. Now what happens if I delete the world file? Does it successfully create a new world? Looks good. Train's honking at something. Does that train horn come in loud for you guys? Now I just thought about this. I said actually earlier in the stream that would be nice. Of like what the eventual things would be. It'd be cool. Like technically, it's even possible right now. Yeah, I could easily just add that. I just add like a key update, so you can do the WASD to go to do XZ movement. Y movement is the spacebar, and the X key. I just add other key mappings to go like the other dimension. So that way I could look at well, there's nothing to see there. There's only the two block types, the inventory and the player. Hello, I'm creating my own NVim config. Need to configure auto completion for HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Probably a fuzzy finder. I've never used NVim. I assume and hope that there's a lot of like plugin support and configs and stuff that are already out there. If there isn't, that's kind of disappointing. That's one of the things I would expect. Yeah, I won't bother now. Basically what I do is just change this schema. I guess I don't know how to just like enforce and validate. I don't know what the best way to do that would be, but basically I just do I change this to be like, you know, x whatever, x0, x1, x2, x3. So that way your player position can not only exist in 3D space, but any arbitrary position in n-dimensional space. And then you could just assign, you know, a certain key to move in that coordinate. Yeah, actually, you know what? That would be an interesting way. I was thinking about doing the experiments with the terrain changing, and that could even be an interesting way to experiment with the terrain. I could just add like another key binding, and then as I I think the database, I already have it even set for 5 dimensions. I just don't use that dimension. It's always 0. So that dimension could be the I could have a parameter from the seed function. It's just based on the value of that dimension. Alright, that's working good. I guess we're at 11:40. I guess I'll quit while I'm ahead tonight. That was one more of those events ironed out. I think there's a couple more with how, I think like inventory item selection. That's another one. And then maybe one with the crafting menu. Those are pretty easy though. Then once that's done, I also need to think about so this thing extends UI work item, but I should probably change it to extend a different class, because I want to send notifications to other threads. I want to let other threads like this chunk initializer thing I want this to be able to, in its init method, I want it to subscribe to events. And to do that, it's going to have to get those work items, which are UI work items now. But I'll have to change the class type to probably some intermediary chunk initializer work item. That extends work item. So this will probably, I'll make this thing extend I don't know, UI notification subscriber work item or something. I'll have to make up some word. But anyway, we'll call it a night there, and we'll be back tomorrow night for day 209. Later.